across America and around the world. Welcome to America's #1 veterans program, the voice of American veterans, Veterans Radio. And now your host for today, former Chief Warrant Officer, 195th Assault Helicopter Company, Republic of Vietnam, 1969, Dale Throneberry.
And hello, America, and welcome to Veterans Radio, as Bob was saying, the #1 of America's Veterans program, the voice of America's veterans. My name is Dale Throneberry, and 1969, holy mackerel, 40 years ago. Oh, I'm starting to feel my age a little bit. Running our board for us today is 101st Airborne's Bob Gould.
Hoorah!
Bob, thanks so much for doing this for us. You know, it's unusual. We do our whole program here live, so folks, you got it. It's exciting, and our adrenaline is always rushing, and sometimes we get a little overexcited. So you'll have to excuse our overmodulation sometimes. My other partner is Gary.
Overmodulation.
Yeah, I like that. That's
I've been overmodulated.
Yeah, that's a technical term. Today's program, the theme of today's program is invisible wounds, and we're going to be talking about traumatic brain injury. But before we get to that, my other partner on Veterans Radio, Gary Lilly, is on the line, and Gary is down in Louisville, Kentucky.
Louisville, good morning to you all.
How you
I'm down
doing?
here for the biannual Vietnam Veterans of America National Convention, where we go over resolutions, see old friends, and when the work is done, we get to have a little bit of relaxation. But this is a workaholic group, and we work on resolutions that are going to set the course for the next 2 years for Vietnam Veterans of America, and we elect new officers and board of directors.
Well, Gary, what are the issues that they're looking at this year?
Well, I was going to hit some of the high ones because, my gosh, we've got the abbreviated form is about 40 resolutions here, and they cover everything from Agent Orange and dioxin. People believe that Agent Orange is something from the past, but they don't know that 2,4-D, which was one of the parts of that soup, and one of the most dangerous, is used in weed control and sold over the counter, and it's the most toxic dioxin never created.
Right.
And you'll hear master gardeners tell people, go after those weeds with 2,4-D.
Well, let me jump in here for a second, Gary. You just did a program on this a couple of weeks ago, and that you can find on our archives about Agent Orange, and there was a new program that came out, or a new report that just came out this week that talked about Agent Orange being a contributor to Parkinson's, heart disease, and high blood pressure.
Exactly, that's right. And now that's the medical report, and now our work is to get the VA to recognize it. And I've got a friend that's coming down with Parkinson's disease.
Yeah, you're going to be on the program, Rick. Hold on.
Who's that?
That's Bob's mic is open while he's talking on the phone.
I hear the old sergeant back. He was a sergeant, was he? Back there
he was
yelling.
a specialist.
Also, some of the things that we're minority affairs is a big one, and that's recognizing the Pacific Islander veterans and some of the Puerto Rican veterans and some of the people that aren't don't qualify for VA health care, and I'm not sure that the Puerto Ricans are part of it. But we're lobbying Congress all the time to get those people who served able to collect VA compensation and to get VA health care treatment. Voting, making voting more accessible to our troops. But the main thing, what's turning on, the founding principle of Vietnam Veterans of America is never again will one generation of veterans abandon another. And our main thrust right now is helping out these troops of today and the Gulf War troops. They've got issues, and our lobbyist, Rick Weidman and Marcia Foer, these are people that really know their issues. They're up there, and talking to Congress door to door, and they are sharp. Boy, do they know the issues. Homeless, big ones. So that's a busy agenda. And when it was all over, we got to see the movie. We're getting into a little bit of the reward time. We saw Taking Chance. It was just nominated for 10 Emmys about the colonel who escorted the body of Chance Phelps back to his hometown. After the movie, the real colonel, the guy that Kevin Bacon played, talked to us and took some questions. And today he'll be one of the keynote speakers. He's and the father of Chance Phelps will also be there.
Wow,
that
was a powerful movie.
Powerful. Everybody, the whole room. There were about 500 Vietnam vets in there, and there must have been some sort of allergies came pumping out of the air conditioning system because there was a lot of sniffles and.
Well, that's understandable with that program, and I would encourage anybody who hasn't seen it yet to go and find that.
And one other thing I want to go, and then I got to jump back into the convention. Is the opening keynote speaker was General Honoré, the guy that the 2-star, 3-star general that was sent into New Orleans to get things organized and get that mess cleaned up. He's the guy that when he arrived, they had trouble with shooting and snipers and shooting back and all that. He got out, and there were some soldiers had their weapons up, and he started yelling at them, "Put those weapons down! Put those weapons down! We're here on a rescue mission." And another time he was up there. He's the guy that said "stuck on stupid," about the way some of these people were running the operation. And he was up on the platform during a press conference, and I don't know what the civilian guy was saying, but he turned to him and said, "That's a bunch of BS. That's a bunch of BS." And there's the 2 civilian guys trying to say how it really wasn't their fault.
Yeah, it sounds like he tells it like it is. Well, it sounds like you're having a good time, and I'm anxious for you to come back and tell us, what you learned at the Vietnam Veterans of America's biannual convention.
And one last thing, and I'm going to go. There I was after giving a little passing out the flyers on Veterans Radio, and the guy yelled to me, afterwards, "Do you know T. Berry?" "Who?" "Dale Throneberry. I flew with him. He saved my life in country 40 years ago." Told me the whole story on it, and he's anxious to talk to you. You guys got a chance to speak for about a minute.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That was very emotional. I was surprised how emotional it was to talk to someone that you hadn't thought of in person for 40 years.
He told me he thinks about you a lot because what you taught him saved his life. And I spoke to him afterwards, after the convention last night, ran into him on the street and a buddy of his, and we spoke for about 40 minutes out on the street.
Well, I'm anxious to talk to Brooks and see what's going on with his life, and thanks for making that connection, Gary. It's amazing what we have learned on this program and how how important it is for us to be the ones to tell those stories. They need to get them out. We know that.
We do.
And that's what we do. And Gary, thanks so very much, and I'll be talking to you next week.
Talk to you then. See you
then. All
then.
right, buddy. Thanks.
Bye.
We're just talking to Gary Lilly, who's down at the Vietnam Veterans of America convention in Louisville, and he'll be back to talk about what he learned down there and what this particular veterans organization is doing to try and help out America's veterans. But joining us on the line right now is an unusual young man, and we're always talking about these young people today. And I want to welcome to our program Sam Kilberg, and Sam is doing a fundraiser today for the Traumatic Brain Injury Association of Michigan. And Sam, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great. Tell me what you're doing today so we can get some people out to your ball games.
This weekend it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm hosting it's the second annual Home Runs for Heroes charity baseball tournament. It's for Michigan military with traumatic brain injury, and the benefits go to the Brain Injury Association of Michigan, the Veterans Program. And
where would people go if they want to see some good ball games?
It's in Rochester Hills, Michigan. It would be at either Rochester High School, Rochester Adams High School, or Stony Creek High School. Games start at 9 a.m. I'm actually at a game right now, and the last game's at 4. And the big game is at Oakland University. It's Sunday. It's the championship games, and they'll start at 9, and the championship game will be at 2.
I just want to point out a few things about Sam, and this is what's so important about the young people today that are supporting America's military and supporting our warriors, is that Sam has been doing this for a couple of years and been very involved in raising funds for the traumatic brain injured. And let me find out here that you not only are you doing baseball games, but you're also did another fundraiser where you raised somewhere around $5,000. What was that activity that you did?
Yeah, I'm on the Government Youth Council in my city, and we hosted a 5K run/walk at one of our local parks. We had about 130 runners, and everyone came out. The donations went straight to the BIAMI, and we raised around, I think it was $4,000 and some change. And that all the money went directly there, and it was a great time. It was one Saturday. We got a bunch of donations. A bunch of people came out. It was a blast.
Well, you're doing a great job, and you were named the Brain Injury Association of Michigan Volunteer of the Year for 2009, and you have worked a lot with our guest that's going to be coming on in the next segment, Major Rick Briggs, retired Air Force. And Sam, I want to thank you so very much for what you're doing, and I want to encourage everybody in the southeast Michigan area, take off up to Rochester, watch some good ball games, and tomorrow to go to your championship game at Oakland University.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, Sam, thank you so very much, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
What a great kid. This is amazing what he's doing.
It is. Yes.
You know, and he's only one of how many hundreds and thousands of young people out there that are raising money for these troops. My heart goes out to them and our wallets too, and we want everybody to go in and see what you can do to help these people out. Each week on Veterans Radio, we always welcome home our troops. We're so happy when you men and women can come home safely, and Bob's got something he wants to talk about. Bob?
Thank you very much. Welcome home. Each week on Veterans Radio, we welcome home servicemen and women who've been stationed around the world in the service of their country and are returning home. Dateline, Pontiac, Illinois. A ceremony in Pontiac, Illinois will welcome home National Guard troops who were deployed to Afghanistan. The National Guard Armory will honor troops who were deployed from the Armory last August as a part of Operation Enduring Freedom. Soldiers, part of the 33rd Infantry Brigade Combat Team, formed police mentor teams to train the Afghan National Police. The soldiers were part of the largest overseas deployment of the Illinois National Guard since World War II. Dateline, Washington, D.C. Hundreds of U.S. servicemen and women got a hero's welcome when they returned home from deployment in Afghanistan. Family and friends gathered at Thurgood Marshall Airport for the happy homecoming. The troops spent the past 9 months in Afghanistan. They were fighting the Taliban, but instead of fighting continually, they helped to rebuild communities all across the war-torn country. Their homecoming was emotional. I quote, "We're doing a good job," said Air Force Major Aaron James. Further quote, "I mean, we're trying to do what we can do to help this country out," end quote. Civilian casualties among the Afghan population have been a growing source, and there's a friction between the Afghan government and the international forces operating there. The unit did a great deal of positive work in the war zone.
I think it's really important that we point that out to people, that there are so many troops over there that are not involved directly in the fighting, but they're involved in the rebuilding of Afghanistan, and in Iraq they're doing the same thing. And these are stories that we don't normally get to see. Go ahead.
No, they were building schools and roads, improving sanitation within the villages. That's great stuff. That shows what we're all about.
Well, that's what we're really trying to do, is we're trying to help these people so that they can help themselves. And I was talking to an Iraq veteran the other day who, he still goes out on patrols and so forth, but he said during their, quote, their downtime, they're building schools, or they're fixing the roads, or they're trying to dig wells and all these other things to help the population. It's not all about blowing things up, folks, and this is what is important. And we're back on Veterans Radio, and there are gremlins, it sounds like, in the control room.
I know. We've had a couple of them today. And I got 8 hours sleep, too. What can I say? A lot of buttons. All
right. We're going to be talking today about invisible wounds. And by invisible wounds, I mean traumatic brain injury, which is said to be the signature injury of the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan and account for over 90% of our troops' casualties. And TBI can be caused by a wide range of functional changes that affect our thinking, sensation, movement, language, and or our emotions. And in fact, many TBI survivors also suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. Joining me on the line right now is the, let's see, I got to get this correct, was Rick Briggs, United States Air Force Major, retired, and is the manager of the Veterans Program for the Brain Injury Association of Michigan. Rick, welcome back to Veterans Radio.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Well, let's talk about what's going on with the traumatic brain injury. And I know that, I don't know if you're going to have somebody try to call in or not, but we wanted to talk today about the symptoms, what causes it, and possibly what some of the treatment is for TBI.
Absolutely. One thing that's happened since I was last on with you, I'm also the National Campaign Director for Invisible Wounds for Operation Forgotten, and people can find out, tied directly into the BIA National, the Brain Injury Association National website through their websites. But it is the invisible wounds are taking a significant toll in homelessness. Of course, you've heard about the suicides.
Right.
We had more suicides in January of this year than we lost in combat in Afghanistan and Iraq combined. Population, the broken marriages, all the things going on, and the single most important trying to get out is these are invisible wounds, and these young men and women can be suffering significantly from them, though you can't see them, but they are treatable, and that's the big deal. There's a stigma associated with any mental health related issue, but what people fail to differentiate is post-traumatic stress disorder is a psychological reaction. It's really a normal reaction to an abnormal situation.
Right. Yes. Absolutely. Are you there? Sounds like we might have lost him. I'm not sure where he went, but let me just kind of go through some of the while we try and get back in touch with Rick. Is that the traumatic brain injury? And this is according to the Mayo Clinic, and I was looking up to see what it was, and I think this is important for all of us to understand. The traumatic injury is usually the result of a sudden violent blow to the head, which launches the brain on a collision course with the inside of the skull. This collision can cause the brain tear nerve fibers and cause bleeding in there. The traumatic brain injury may also result from objects such as bullets or even shattered pieces of skull that would enter the skull, as many of these people in combat can go there. And it looks like we've got him back. Rick, we got you back?
Yes, sir. Am I there?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened. As we said, everything is kind of falls apart every once in a while. But what I wanted to do is to talk about what I've been describing while you were gone is what causes TBI. What happens inside of the head when these explosives go off or they get hit in the head? Well,
substantially what's happening is the ballistic wave is actually traversing right through the body. And even though, and I'm not talking about the fireball, and I'm not talking and the other type of, visible impact. I'm talking about a shock wave that actually right through the brain, and it's affecting at the neuron and subneuron level. And to tell you some of the isolated, very specific things that are going on in the brain, even though they're very, very mild and they're not something you can really self-diagnose, we've had veterans that say their food tastes different. They come home and their favorite meal, they don't even like the taste. I've got guys who say their diets changed. Vegetables they didn't used to eat, they like now. And that shows that the receptor perception process and strength of the brain can get altered with these shock waves. The emotion centers you mentioned, sensuality, sexuality, the highs and lows, the peaks and valleys. Some people become more docile, some become more aggravated. We have guys who say smells smell different. Their wife's perfume smells perception-wise different than it did before. So it can be something very, very subtle. But a lot of these can really affect job performance, relationship maintenance, and sustaining a relationship. As you know, marriage and families and so on are tough enough when everything's going well. But when you have these other things impacting your perception of what is going on, that's where the experts need to come in. And I'm talking about certified brain injury experts that are rehabilitation specialists. And there's some very specific things they do in their specialized community that you just can't walk into the local hospital and get.
Right. We're talking with Rick Briggs, who's with the the Brain Injury Association of Michigan, and we're trying to go through some of the issues that our troops go through. If you have a question or if you've experienced TBI, give us a call here at Veterans Radio at 877-573-7825, 877-573-7825. we know that it doesn't obviously just affect military people. I'm just looking through here when they talk about mild traumatic brain injuries, and this could be, you could be playing baseball and get hit in a helmet, but you might have a brief period of unconsciousness, amnesia about what happened, headache, confusion, dizziness, loss of balance, sensory problems, as you mentioned, or bad taste in your mouth where food doesn't taste quite the same that it used to, as you mentioned, mood changes, and even memory and concentration problems. And these are issues that you don't really understand if you have been. Many of us have been, hit in the head at some point in our lives, and we don't realize that it could cause these problems to us, and that's just mild. And many of these men and women is a little bit more traumatic, as you were mentioning.
And that presents a great problem. And you're right about the civilian population. Just to talk about that very briefly, we're talking about over 2% of the U.S. population has been affected with a brain injury. If you took HIV/AIDS, multiple sclerosis, spinal cord injury, and breast cancer, and combined them all, multiply that total number by 6. That's the size of the issue you're talking about. It is the leading cause of death in young people back in the civilian. And that's not counting veterans or shaken babies. And those numbers you can get off the CDC website. But in a combat environment with these young men and women, they come back and they seem fine. Something's different. They're affected. But when you think about your reaction time, your cognitive processing, your sequencing skills to, strategize and so on, communicative skills, your sense of balance, those are critical skills in a combat environment. And unfortunately, all too often our young men and women, they feel fine, they look normal. And in a short interaction, if you go up and talk to somebody who was just hit, they might seem a little dazed and confused, but then, a few hours later they seem fine. But you really don't know the impact and how that is going to affect them long term. And in a lot of cases, these shock waves, the brain has an amazing healing process that immediately starts kicking in and so on. But some of these symptoms get worse with time. And that's one of the things, and some of them take 3 to 5 years to start really manifesting themselves and raising their ugly head. And unfortunately, all too often, the vets have not contacted the VA and processed because at the time they're okay. They're not as good as, but, just like the World War II vets and, Vietnam, Korea, and all them, they come home, they all go through it, they suck it up, they get back to work, and, that's the negative aspect of the military culture is these, not asking for help when you should be.
Right. We're talking with Rick Briggs, and Rick, you were also involved, and Bob has a comment here he wants to make. He was just up at Grayling last week watching the training that the National Guard is going through, and he wants to comment. He wants to ask you a question about the helmets. So, Bob?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Dale, and welcome, Rick. Bob Gould here.
Yep.
I'm just up at Grayling, and one of the things that I observed was that they wore their helmets. They wore their helmets, and they had their chin straps fastened. I wanted to say that because I looked. We didn't see any John Wayne, Iwo Jima movie with the chin straps hanging down, the cool
look. Well, that's because of the old days.
They were fastened.
The old brain bucket was very uncomfortable. And these new BLUs, ballistic liner upgrade units that they've installed, I'm glad you highlighted that. It's very important they use them. And same thing with sports, which you mentioned earlier, football helmets, baseball, biking, skateboarding, there's no cure for brain injury, but you can prevent it. And these ballistic shock waves can be reduced by up to 60% with this new high density, and it's not just a foam. I mean, it really is technologically advanced. I think there's something like 27 different layers of composite foams in there, but the helmets are simple now, as opposed to the old strap suspension systems. Not only does it help prevent, but these guys will be sleeping in their helmets. I'm talking about in a combat environment, and they're so much more comfortable that they actually do leave them on even when they don't have to, and that's a wonderful thing. It builds up their neck muscles. They get used to it to where it's just a part of them, kind of like wearing a seatbelt in a car.
Well, I think as Bob had mentioned, in fact, this is really ironic. We were having our regular breakfast production meeting, and a gentleman at the next table was talking about a man from Ann Arbor, and you may even know him, and I couldn't remember he didn't mention his name, but who is trying to develop a new helmet for the military. He's already developed football helmets that the University of Michigan uses that are safe. He's about 90 years old. And he's working again on an upgrade on combat helmets that he thinks will almost eliminate entirely TBIs as a result. And I don't know if you've been in touch with him yet, but I know that they were trying to figure out, because one of the people at lunch said, "Oh yeah, we know Rick." So it's getting to be a very, very small world.
Well, 3 years ago, before I went into the brain injury community, I ran the Michigan chapter for Operation Helmet, helping to get the ballistic liners, getting the government to procure them, install them, and now they're standard issue. So, it took 4.5 years, but we got it, as part of the routine equipment now. And I'm really glad that you commented about the wear of the helmets, because, and I'll give you an example. We just had an event here last June called Heroes in Helmets. It's part of the Tips Up for Troops bass fishing tournament we do and all that. And the focus is really on wearing helmets. And we call it Heroes in Helmets because we're saluting firemen, police, the Homeland Security, military, anybody who wears a helmet in the line of duty, out there protecting us and so on. Because those are the real heroes in our society. And the kids look up to them, and we're trying to make it cool to wear a helmet, whether they're bike riding, skateboarding, anything, inline rollerblades, any of that stuff. And the parents need to wear them too, because it's not much of an example. You're telling the kids they got to wear their bike helmet, and then mom and dad hop on and don't. So
I can relate to that entirely. And my grandson is just learning how to ride his bicycle, and Papa went out and bought a bike, an old used bike, and I have to get a helmet before I can let him see me riding it.
There you go.
It wouldn't be good. And I have a cousin, I guess a second cousin, who was in a motorcycle accident in Florida, and his helmet was not one of the better quality ones, and he's still in rehab 3 years after the accident because of his head, just brain being rattled entirely.
Right.
We got about a minute till we come up to our first break, Rick, and I wanted to talk about we talked about some of the symptoms that can result from being hit with an explosive round. What can we do as far as what is the treatment? I'm stuttering here. What is the treatment?
Well, what they do is, first of all, it's important to get in with certified brain injury, specialists, experts in the specific arena, because when they go through the screening process, they'll go through and they'll find out what happened to your body, what area is it affected. Is it an emotion sensor? Is it a cognitive speech and audiology? Is it one of the pathologies that's been impacted? And what they'll do is they'll focus on whatever areas were affected, and then they'll teach you ways to, one, compensate for deficiencies and how to enhance them. They'll give you exercises, brain teasers, all these types of things.
Hold that thought. We're going to we'll be talking more specifically about the treatment when we come back. We're talking about traumatic brain injury. You're listening to Veterans Radio.
The Medal of Honor is the highest award for valor in combat given a member of the Armed Forces of the United States. There have been over 3,400 recipients of the nation's highest award. This is one of them. Marine Sergeant Louis Kukala received not one, but 2 Medal of Honors during World War I. Details after this. When his company, advancing through a wood, met with strong resistance from an enemy strong point, Kukala crawled out from the flank and made his way toward the German lines in the face of heavy fire, disregarding the warnings of his comrades. He succeeded in getting behind the enemy position and rushed a machine gun emplacement, killing or driving off the crew with his bayonet. With German hand grenades, he then bombed out the remaining portion of the strong point, capturing 4 men and 2 damaged machine guns. He was awarded the Medal of Honor by both the Army and the Navy for this action.
The Medal of Honor series is a production of Veterans Radio.
We're back on Veterans Radio, listening to a little bit of patriotic music from John Philip Sousa. We're talking with Rick Briggs, who is the program manager for the veterans programs for the Brain Injury Association of Michigan, and we've been talking about some of the symptoms that are connected with a traumatic brain injury and some of the things that people can do. Rick, where can people go to get some more information on this?
Well, the easiest tie-in is right directly to our website, actually, and that can get them into a lot of things. One, a lot of information about the symptoms. They can read about brain injury. and they can tie into a lot of national organizations right through our website. And that is www.BIAMI. That's Bravo India Alpha Mike India. It stands for Brain Injury Association. MI is Michigan. .org. BIAMI.org. And they can get a lot of information right there.
Well, we certainly encourage them to do that. And you were mentioning earlier that a lot of times it's family members that notice that the veteran's behavior has changed, and in some cases dramatically. And so we encourage people to watch out for their men and women that are coming home. And I don't mean to stare at them, but, if you notice some subtle changes in there, we know that it's a touchy subject because many of us have been there before when we came home from a conflict. And, we're pretty defensive about our behavior sometimes. How can they go about getting through that barrier that we set up on our own?
Well, that's the really tough part. What portion of their change is just because of the deployment that everybody goes through? That's the good question. Unfortunately, a lot of people say, just leave me alone. I'll be,
right.
I'll get better, whatever. With 80% of the symptoms being relevant to both PTSD and TBI, it's really difficult to ascertain, is this a psychological thing? Is it physiological? Is it just the normal, hey, I'm home now, I'm back in a different environment? And, self-diagnosis is not the best way to go.
Right.
Go in, get checked in, go through the screening. If they do some very base level screenings, if there's enough flags that come up, they'll send you to the next level of screening. And again, if every screening level is set up to funnel it in as to what it is, all the way up to the full 6-7 hour neuropsych eval. And again, you need to get with the experts.
We're not saying. I agree with Rick entirely on this self-diagnosis thing because we all think sometimes we can become experts in stuff, and we're trying to make sure that you don't just sit there and suffer alone. Let's put it this way, and it's not just
Absolutely.
You. I was thinking of if you go to some veterans organizations, they have group meetings where you can sit down and talk about some of the issues that you're going through, and you'll find out that you're not alone, and that you're not the only one that can't necessarily remember everything or that gets angry at what you think are simple things. And I think that might give you a little clue that, well, maybe somebody can help me. And
right.
I think it's really important to do that to all of the people out there.
And one of the really difficult things is you think about the symptoms with PTSD, and if a guy goes through his PTSD program but it doesn't seem to be working, there may be a physiological injury, which is the cause of that. And I kind of liken it to pumping air in a tire that's got a hole in it. You got all this good training and so on going in, but if the brain can't process the information the way it needs to, and different centers have been affected, you need to get them rehabilitated and let the experts get to work so you can get your life back. And I'm talking about a quality of life, not just going through life.
Right. I understand that. Well, I wanted to ask you, Rick, I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking about traumatic brain injury. But I also wanted you mentioned that your son is coming back and is going to be starting some new training soon. Tell me a little bit about that. The people that we talk to on this program, folks, all have credibility, and Rick has got it. And so I wanted to ask you about what's going on with your son.
We're very excited. Jeremy got back actually a year and a half ago now from Iraq. They did he was an MP up in Mosul, and he did over 200 combat patrols. He had about 12 to 15 IED exposures and all that. So there were some early symptoms and signs and so on that we were monitoring. He went through all the screening. Of course, when your dad does this for a living, he's not going to let you get away with just, fine, leave me alone. But, he has his college degree. He completed OCS. He became the 5th Mustang in our family to go from enlisted to officer ranks, just pinned on as second lieutenant. He got a Black Hawk helicopter pilot slot. So we're very happy for him, and he'll be starting that training next year.
I think that's great. Of course, as a former helicopter pilot, I always think it's wonderful when those young men and women can get in there and fly those things. They're amazing. And
they call that work. Can you believe it?
That's just what I was talking about with somebody the other day. They paid me to fly these things. It was great. Anyway, I want to thank you so very much for being on Veterans Radio, Rick, and I know that we'll be talking again in future, and I want to get together and talk about that helmet thing with you again. So thanks very much.
Absolutely.
And
thank you very much for what you guys do, getting the word out to the vets. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll be
Bye-bye.
talking to you again soon. Well, folks, it's another great example of what veterans are doing to help veterans. It's what the civilians are doing to help veterans out there. I mean, we're talking about a 17-year-old young boy from Rochester, Michigan, putting on a baseball tournament to raise funds for veterans that are suffering from traumatic brain injury. I think that's what is so cool. I wanted to get Bob on here for just a minute here at the end of the program, because Bob and Gary, as I mentioned last week, went up to Grayling to observe the training that the National Guard is going through. And you mentioned something interesting this morning when we were looking at a picture in the local newspaper about the training that's up there. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, I would, Dale. When I saw that photograph in the Detroit Free Press a couple of days ago, I know, folks, this may sound funny, but it actually triggered something. At the end of the firefight that we watched, and it was a firefight, it had explosions, a lot of noise, machine guns going off. There was something that happened to my body. When it was over, it took about 45 minutes for the entire exercise to play itself out. I was energized. I almost felt like having tears when it stopped and it was over. Just for that moment, my whole body was reacting, and what it was reacting to were the sounds, the explosions, the sounds of rifle fire, the sounds of the orders being given. And then all of a sudden it stopped. The bad guys went away, and everybody was now decompressing. And I even commented to Gary. I turned to him immediately, because we were right in the middle of it, covering it, and I said, "Did you see what I saw? Did you feel what I saw?" And of course he said, yes, he did. And we just stared at each other. Now, the other day, when I saw that photograph, it started to come back. And it wasn't anxiety. It was a rush. Mm-hmm. It was the body. What would you? Well, you.
It's just a reaction. I mean, all you're doing is, it's almost like you're reliving it. Yes, over again, and, right. and even though it was, it wasn't real ammunition.
No, there weren't real bullets in that.
Right, but it's just the noise level. It pumps up your adrenaline so high because you've got this fight or flee thing going on in your mind, the noise goes away, and it's like you want to touch yourself and go, oh, okay, I'm still here, and you try to go on, and then you'll see a picture, and it'll come right back again.
I did do that. I actually, during the firefight, I started to crouch down. I mean, I didn't know what else was going to happen, so I'm crouching down. Gary crouched down, and there we were. And I wanted to give that to our listeners. I wanted to give that to our listeners. That is real. It does.
And these are things. This is what comes back to a veteran every time they hear a sound that sounds familiar, or they smell a smell, and it's just amazing. We want to. We're coming up at the end of the program, folks, as usual, and we just wanted to thank Rick Briggs for being on, Sam Kilberg and his baseball tournament up in Rochester, Michigan. If you get the opportunity, go on up there to Oakland University. We're going to be doing a live program from Eastern Michigan University on September 5th. When Eastern plays West Point. We're going to be there in the morning for a show, and we're actually going to have a tailgate party at the game, which is going to be at 4 o'clock at Rynearson Stadium in Ypsilanti, Michigan, on the campus of Eastern Michigan University. We hope that all of you will come out. We have food and all kinds of things for you. I'm anxious for you to listen in next week. We've got some great programs coming up. Until then, you are dismissed.
The views and opinions expressed on Veterans Radio LLC are not necessarily the views of this program, of this station, or its network.